Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. This is episode 64, and I'm your host, Brian Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. Be sure to like and share the program as well. You can also support the program by going to Anchor FM or Spotify and clicking the support button. Folks, do you own a business? Do you want exposure? Do you want to be heard? Let me help you advertise your business right here on this podcast. Program sponsorships include a custom written script to advertise your business to its fullest potential. Email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com and let's set up an impactful advertising plan to help you and your business get the results you're looking for. Again, email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com. That's thetallybill@gmail.com. And let's get started today. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. Nick Rahm is an Air Force Security Forces veteran with 4 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Nick founded Warrior's Next Adventure, a 501c3 to help vets overcome PTSD, providing a 24/7 crisis line, dirt track race cars, wolf sanctuary, mountain climbing, and more. Nick is also a motivational speaker for the Air Force and will be rowing across the Atlantic Ocean this December. And with that, we are joined by Nick Rahm himself. How are you, sir?
Good. You make me feel like I need to get out of here and start doing other things, man. I'm so busy all the fucking time. It's nice to finally just sit down and just talk to somebody, chill out a little bit. Just going 100 miles an hour at all times, man.
Hey, yeah, I see you've got this going on. You got this going on. You started a carpentry business too, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a carpenter my whole life. I started when I was 16, and I just recently I live off a disability. I'm at 80%, so I can run my nonprofit full time. I don't really have any other income. I don't get paid from the nonprofit or anything like that. So I decided to start doing carpentry again on the side, but also hiring veterans to work alongside me. So it's another way for me to help out vets that don't have any experience, zero experience, to come work with me. I pretty much here hold this nail. If you don't know how to swing a hammer, you at least know how to do that by the end of the day. So I just I get bored and I start businesses. So I've been called a serial entrepreneur.
And with that far northern accent, you've got to be pretty close to Canada, I say.
Yeah, I'm up in Minnesota, down in the metro right now. We're getting ready to move. Hopefully, when I get back from rowing the ocean, we're looking for a property to open up a mental health retreat for the nonprofit. So we'll be moving farther north, out in the country.
Farther north, eh?
Oh yeah.
So Nick, where did you grow up, man? And what was life like as a kid?
I grew up in Eastside St. Paul, pretty much everywhere in Eastside St. Paul. We moved around quite a bit. Dad and Ma got a divorce pretty early in life. I think it was like 2 or 3. And with my mom, we lived in like 20 different houses before I was 10 years old. Bounced around quite a bit. And then long story, but my mom dropped me off at my dad's house when I was 10 and kind of disappeared and lived with my dad in Roseville. Lauderdale technically, but people not from Minnesota aren't going to know that's at. So in between Minneapolis, St. Paul, stayed there until I graduated high school and then left for the military.
There's so many veterans that have a very similar story that I have interviewed. It seems as if the father wasn't around in a lot of veterans' lives, especially in the beginning. You had a different scenario, getting dropped off at 10. But yeah, I was taken away from my father at 3, my brother at 1. And it's just so crazy on how all these stories are so similar in the beginning. It's as if we were looking, when we joined the military, we were looking for that support structure, or perhaps looking for that mentor, or to just grow up and learn how to be a man.
Well, it's like the camaraderie aspect. Like if anybody out there hasn't read the book Wild at Heart, it kind of explains a lot of that. It talks about the traumas and the scars that your parents leave on you. So Wild at Heart is about men. There's another book about for females. I can't remember what it's called. I haven't read it yet. My girlfriend has, and she's recommended it. But it's the same kind of thing, but just for women. But it often talks about the scars that your parents leave on you. And so most men, they need some sort of affirmation from a prominent predominant male figure. So I'm not good with words. We need a good male figure to essentially tell us that they're proud of us, that we need affirmation from, or to tell us that we're a wild man, that you hear in the book. And I think that's something that a lot of veterans or a lot of people in the military going into the military are searching for, something along those lines. But we get all of that. We get the leader, which is in basic training. It's him. And then it's our first sergeant, whoever it is, like a staff sergeant or whatever. And then at the same time, you get the camaraderie from all the boys, right? You're a part of something bigger than yourself. There's another book, Tribe, that describes this very well. I highly recommend anyone reads the book Tribe. But it talks about everybody needs a tribe. And that's what a lot of military age males are searching for. And the military is pretty much a guaranteed way of finding it. And it kind of fills a lot of gaps that most people in the military kind of suffered through when they were kids. I'm not saying everybody who joins the military comes from a lot of trauma, but there's a lot of people who come from trauma that join the military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's exactly how you just explained is the majority of the people that join. I know the Marine Corps and Army because I've had a lot of those guys on. And
sure.
It's really no different in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just kind of it's just eye-opening when you see the type of people that are joining and they're joining for these reasons, perhaps to have that family and again that structure, that support system. Men need men, right? Equally
Mm-hmm.
yoked. I talked about that a lot on the program. Iron sharpens iron. It's the same thing with females. Other females need other females in their lives. It's how you build that camaraderie and evolve and grow it, as a person, and so on and so forth. So, growing up as a kid, in East Side of St. Paul, you would end up joining the Air Force. What was the path like to get there, and why the Air Force?
So my dad was a Marine, and me and my dad get along great now. He's like my best friend. I love him. We don't hang out too often. Maybe like once a month, once every other month. We're just both busy living our lives, and we're kind of to the point where like, hey, come over whenever you want to come over, and that's about it. So it, we didn't get along when I was a kid. He wasn't really around much. On top of that, my birth mom was not a very good person. If any of you have ever seen Waterboy, she was mama. Like everybody was the devil. And she kind of pushed me against everybody. She turned me against my whole family and eventually got to the point where I literally thought everybody was evil. And everybody was out to get me. And, like I said before, long story short, when I was 10 years old, I got dropped off at my dad's house. What had happened was my mom had gotten in a pretty severe snowmobile accident with my stepdad. My stepdad was extremely abusive. He'd beat the living shit out of me and my mom constantly. It was it was a rough childhood, in that period of time. And it got to the point where eventually it went from him beating her to him beating me and throwing me down the stairs and pinning me down and slapping me in the face and telling me I was ugly and I was stupid and I was worthless. And so I pretty much grew up with zero self-esteem. And what ended up happening was when they crashed the snowmobile, he had crawled into the house because we lived right on a lake. We were maybe 20, 30 feet away from the lake, maybe farther. I don't remember. So he came crawling into the house and I heard him come in. I'm like, are you okay? He's like, no, your mom's dead. So I ran out to the lake and my mom was actually laying there and she was dead. So I put her head in my lap, pulled her helmet off, and I started giving her a really shitty version of CPR and actually brought her back. And when she came back, she spit blood all over my face and I had to run inside the house. I ran downstairs because I went to call 911 and my stepdad told me if I called the cops that he was going to kill me. And he was a great guy. So we had an emergency phone in the basement, right? So that tells you the kind of childhood that I lived through. The emergency phone was essentially when he would get too drunk, I would be on standby if he started going crazy and started pulling out guns, because it had happened multiple times. So I call 911, I run out with a blanket, and I grew up watching Rescue 911, so I knew, like, blanket, she's in shock, get her warm. And I just kept her alive till the ambulance got there, and she died a couple times in the emergency surgery table. She had broken every rib in her right side. She'd punctured her lungs, screwed up her liver, broke her collarbone, all kinds of stuff. She was in a body cast for about 6 months, and I almost had to repeat the 6th grade because I had to miss school so often to take care of her. Like I said, she was in a body cast. She could barely walk. I had to help her. I had to wipe her butt. I had to learn how to cook. I make a killer beef stew these days. I'm a damn good cook now because of it. You got to take the best out of a tragedy. And what ended up happening was when she got out of her body cast, she dropped me off at my dad's house and just never came back. So I was pretty disconnected from my dad just because I blamed him for a lot of it because of what my mom would constantly tell me. She was always telling me that he was a pig and he was a piece of shit, and she was very anti-men, and that's not a good recipe for raising a boy, is being anti-men. That's not a good thing. And luckily my dad remarried, and my stepmom Lisa was like she's my mom. She still is my mom. I love her. Her and my dad aren't together anymore, but she's my mom. She took over that role. And we go to her house for Thanksgiving every year. We go to her house for Christmas. Like she took over. And I'm pretty happy that she did, because I don't know who the hell I would be without her. Because I didn't really have any positive adult figures. My dad was traveling for business. Like I said, our memories are flawed, and I'm assuming that a lot of my memories between me and my dad were slightly flawed, but I don't have a lot of great memories. A lot of it was him yelling at me. A lot of it was, me getting screamed at all the time. And it was the whole Marine in him that he always, would bring out. And that was always his excuse. Like, I was in the Marines, rah! And he would just go fucking nuts. And nothing against the Marines, but it was difficult to live with a father like that. When I graduated high school, I had already decided I want to join the military, and I was going to join the Marines. And he's like, "Don't you dare join the Marines, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "You talk about it all the time. Like, this big fucking thing. You're so proud of it." And I'm finally saying I want to do it. I was like, "Is it because you don't think I'm good enough?" He's like, "No, I just da da da." And I'm like, "Whatever." And so I walk into an Air Force recruiter, and I said, "Well, I want to be a cop." Because of that day that my mom crashed her snowmobile, there was a cop that had showed up, and he was like one of the nicest guys in the world. He made me feel comfortable. He made me feel safe. Like, I was scared of my stepdad all the time, and the guy kind of picked up on that. But my stepdad had told me if I ever tell the cops anything that he would kill me. And so I'd never said anything. I was always quiet. I was too scared to talk to the cops. But he came by and checked on me a few times, and he we never really talked too much, but it was just the fact that he kept coming out to check on a 9-year-old kid, who had damn near lost his mom. He knew something wasn't right. And he picked up on it, but I felt protected when he was around. And so that was kind of when I decided I wanted to be a cop. So I joined the Air Force as security forces, and, basic training was super easy for me. Cause it was just like, get yelled at, do push-ups, run, eat food, fold your clothes, go to bed. I'm like, this is super simple. I really enjoy this. So, the chaos was actually kind of nice for me. So basic was easy.
Man, I'm so sorry that you had to go through those childhood traumatic events, man. I can't imagine what you're going through, and how life changed, for you, as a child, having been through those experiences. And hopefully that stepfather of yours is behind bars somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know.
Living, yeah, because that's just, man. Again, I'm sorry, and thank you for sharing that, man.
Yeah, no, it's
Because
all
that's
good. I mean, it's part of my history. It sucks. It doesn't have any control over me anymore. I'm obviously I'm doing pretty damn well. But the trauma is guaranteed in life, and
mm,
there's a lot of people struggling with traumas that they've never actually worked on. And so people want to just bury it, bury it, bury it. And that's what ends up burying people. I mean, that's why we have the 22 plus suicides a day for veterans. is because you're burying traumas and you're trying to hide things instead of actually working through your issues to try to resolve it, because that trauma is never going to go away ever. It's always going to be there, right? But you can decide how much power that trauma has over you. And that's kind of when I had my realization, that's the premise of the book, essentially, and my speeches and everything. It's just trauma's guaranteed. You're never going to go through life without trauma. A baby cries because their worst trauma is the fact that they're hungry and they feel that pain. That's trauma, right? Whether it's a bad trauma or not, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's up to the person. It's different from person to person,
Absolutely. I tell everybody every day, man, it's like adversity will come knocking. You never know when it's going to come a knocking, but when you answer that door, none of us are ever prepared for what's going to be on the other side of that door. Some traumas are worse than others, of course, but yeah, it's how you handle it and how you go through those next motions that will ultimately define who you are and who you will become down the road. And that's very real. And life happens, traumas happen every single day, and it's just, you got to live your best life. You got to live as if it's your last. You got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy the time. You got to enjoy the camaraderie, your friends, your family, and people need to understand to take time to smell the roses and live in the moment.
Oh, for sure.
As well. So,
that's why we printed this shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but there we go. It's live a life of purpose for those who can't.
Yeah, there you go.
This has been my bestseller for sure. But you got to stop and think. There's so many people that have lost people overseas, and they're living shit lives and they hate their lives, and it's because of their choices that they've made. And a lot of people hate when I say that. I mean, you saw my post. I saw you commented on it. The victim mentality gets you nowhere, right? I think about it like this. Think about the folks who died overseas and put them in your shoes. What if you were the one that died and they were living your life? Would you be proud of them? Or would you say, hey, you need to get your shit together, And it seems harsh, of course. And, when I help veterans, I'm not always as harsh, but the reality of it is we are driving the car. We're the one in charge, and we're the ones that need to make the decision to actually improve ourselves. The biggest, I know we're going off on a tangent, sorry, but the biggest downfall of mental health is people think that a therapist is going to fix you. Medication is going to fix you. No, it's not. All of that is just tools. You're the one that ultimately needs to make the decision. You're the one that needs to go to therapy. You're the one that needs to apply what the therapist taught you. That's essentially that's all they're doing. They're just teaching you how to cope, right? And so people say, well, therapy doesn't work. Well, you're right. It doesn't work because you say it doesn't work. You go in there, you're fighting it already before you even sit down and talk to somebody, and you're not going to learn anything because you have to actually sit down and take what they're saying to you, whether you respect them or not. Just shut up and listen. They might throw some gems at you here and there that might help you, further along in life.
There will come a time for folks that are playing that victim card that they're tired of it because they know that nobody's going to come to save them, and that ultimately only you can save you. And that's when I traded in my victim card for my accountability card when I was going through my storm that would last for years and years and years. And you know what? Again, people will support you. People will encourage you. People will inspire you, but they are not going to come and save you because you are the one in charge. Like you said, you're the one driving that car. What type of vehicle are you going to get in to get to the promised land? What does that vehicle look like? Well, that vehicle will look like what you put into it, the work, the food, the therapy, all these tools that you talk about is the vehicle that we get in. Now, look, I want to get to your combat service. You would you would deploy 4 times to Iraq and Afghanistan. Describe the sacrifice of somebody like you serving overseas and what your day-to-day operations would look like, Nick.
Well, for me, it wasn't really a sacrifice. I mean, I wanted to get the hell out of Minnesota. My friends weren't making great decisions, and I didn't really want to become a part of that. And it was either become a loser alcoholic, with everybody else, or go do something with my life. And, like I had said, I had already experienced so much damn trauma. Like, what's the military going to do to me? It's not going to be much worse than my childhood. But when I got out of basic training and went to my first base, and the way it works in the Air Force is you go to, it's similar to Army, Marines. You go to basic training, you go to tech school, and then after tech school, you go to your first base. You go to an integration training in the Air Force, essentially to teach you how to be in the Air Force, not how to be in basic training, right? The proper customs and courtesies, and like how day-to-day life actually works in the Air Force when you're actively serving, rather than just basic training and tech school. So that's usually about a month. And then after that, in security forces, we have what's called flights, right? So a flight is like a shift. You get day shift, mid shift, afternoon shift, but it's Alpha flight, Bravo flight, Charlie flight. So you go to the flight training, and that usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks. And it's a lot of OJT stuff like that, but it's also teaching you familiarization of the base, because we're the ones that protect the aircraft and the base and everything like that. I didn't even get out of that before they're like, "Hey, you're deploying to Iraq," and I'm like, I don't even know how to do my job. Like, they're like, "Yeah, you're fine." And they put me on a 249, and I was just really good at it. So they put me on a 240, and I was really good at it. And so like, all right, well, you're going to be the gunner. And we went to pre-deployment training. So the security forces, we don't deploy as a whole base. We take like 10 to 12 people from like 10 bases, and we all go to a pre-deployment training together, and we train together for about 2 to 3 months. So we went to like a week-long thing, because as we were on our way down, it used to be called like Brave Defender down in the panhandle of Florida. It's Pensacola. And while we were there, we're supposed to go to is it called Tikrit? I can never say it right. But anyway, we ended up going to Qatar instead. So my first deployment was to Qatar. I know I always say to Iraq and Afghanistan, but it's just easier to say Iraq and Afghanistan and Qatar. I always tell people that Qatar was rough, man. It was rough. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Qatar, but if you've ever had to walk a mile and a half to the gym and they're out of mint ice cream, it's the worst day of your life, man. It's a struggle. It was quite nice. They had a Chili's by the poolside. It was wonderful. And it was an Army base. So before all you assholes come say, "Oh, it was Air Force," no, it was an Army base. SETCOM was there, so like they had the good stuff there. I was in Asalea. That was all right. And then I got back from that deployment. I told my unit deployment manager, I'm like, "Dude, don't ever send me on a friggin' deployment like that again. That was so boring. Like, I actually want to go do something." And like, "Well, you're a good gunner. Let's put you on a 50 cal this time." I'm like, "Okay." And so I got back. I went on leave for a month. I came back to flight training. I didn't get out of flight training again before I was on pre-deployment training. So I still had never done my job. And this was 2008. And so what I started doing was we went to a bunch of pre-deployment training, and they just pretty much put me on only training for deployments. I started doing 50 cal training, and I was damn good at that. And they're like, "All right, well, you're definitely our lead 50 cal guy." And I had never been good at anything in my life. Now, this isn't me bragging. I literally have never, even after the military, I've never been good at anything. I've always had to work my ass off to be good at something. But shooting a 50 cal and a 240, I was just, for some reason, I was damn good. And we went to our pre-deployment training, and there's a competition out at Yakima Shooting Center called Top Gun, or they call it Top Gunner. And I believe it's 20 targets up to 2,000 meters. And they time you, it's scored off of time, targets hit, and accuracy. My average time from the target popping up to dropping down was like 0.7 seconds. I was quick as shit. And I ended up setting the record for Yakima Shooting Center. So that's military wide. That's Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. And I remember I got in trouble. In the Air Force, we called it LOR, letter reprimand or whatever. Marines, Army, they all have their different name for it. And there was a coining ceremony after I won that, and a general came up and coined all of us. And he looks at me, he's like, "Son, you're too damn good to be in the Air Force. You sure you don't want to come be a Ranger?" I'm like, "No, sir. You guys do too much PT." And he laughed, and I thought it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. And they pulled me in the office like literally 15 minutes later and gave me an LOR. Like, "You can't talk shit to a general." I was like, "Come on." Trauma has given me a great sense of humor. And that's pretty much how I deal with most stuff, is just laugh at it. But we ended up going to Iraq, and that was my first actual deployment. Qatar, you can't really count that. So we get to Iraq, and our job, we were called the Scorpions. So we were doing route clearance. Our main job was to drive up. They called it what was it? The main road. It was Tampa, right? And then it was Miami or Maui, I think it was. So Maui was the road from was it Qasar, and there's like a dockyard down in Camp Bucca in the southern part of Iraq called Qasar, and that road goes all the way up to Bridge 1, and then Bridge 1 starts Tampa. And so we would almost never go north of Tampa. We would sometimes do convoys up to Basra and back, and pretty much all we did was just find IEDs, and we were pretty damn good. I was the lead gunner, and I don't know how many I found, but we found quite a few. A lot of them were just bullshit. Some of them are mortars that were just sitting there. Some of them were, they had the different phases. Phase 1 was like they dug the hole or they got it ready. Phase 2 is they put the device in. Phase 3, they set it up. Phase 4 is it detonates. I think that's still the way it goes. I'd have to talk to Phil Blackman. He'd be the expert on that. But it got kind of crazy. We had a prisoner escape while we were out there, and that actually is that's pretty crazy considering he escaped somewhere on the base, and he could be anywhere. And now you have some Al-Qaeda terrorist running around on your base. And I think the worst of it was like you realize that you're actually at war when they found out that he didn't run away. He had pissed off a bunch of their prisoners, and they ended up killing him. They chopped him up and they buried him in a bunch of different pieces. So it's like, that's the kind of life that we're dealing with right now. This is insane. And I get back from that deployment, and man, I try not to make it worse than it actually was, but like, dude, I could barely drive after that. Because like all I was thinking about was bombs everywhere. Like everything was a bomb. Fucking garbage was a bomb. Like every piece of trash was a bomb, and I was freaking the fuck out. And it got to the point where it took me probably 2 to 3 weeks to calm down and actually get to the point where I could get in my car and drive myself to work. And I felt like such a wuss, man. Like I couldn't tell anybody this because in the military, everyone knows that if you're having any kind of psych issues, you're automatically ostracized and pushed away. And I kind of just buried it as much as possible, like most people do when they're in the military. And I started to go to flight. Right now, this was 2009 in January. I had been in since October 2006. I still had never done my actual job. So I start pre-deployment like flight training, and they put me in there. They put me out on the flight line, and I don't know what to do. I've never been trained on what to do. They just assume, hey, you've been in for 3 years, you're fine. And so I sit out there and I miss a bunch of radio checks because I didn't even know my call sign. I didn't know anything. So I'm just sitting there like driving around the flight line. Next thing you know, a squad car pulls up, and like they just start screaming at me like, why are you yelling at me? Like, what did I do wrong? So they bring me in the office and they're cussing me out. And I'm like, I still don't know what I did wrong. And they're like, you don't know what you're doing. I was like, listen, I've never been on flight. I've never touched flight. I've never worked a day of flight. And they start yelling at me like, you've been in since 2006. I was like, I know, you guys keep deploying me. I was like, I've deployed twice and I've only been here for a year and a half, And so I was only on flight for like 3 months. And then they pulled me and put me on pre-deployment trainer. So I was training the base populace in pre-deployment training. So like the finance guys, like the guys that aren't combat roles, but they're deploying, they still have to go through some sort of pre-deployment training. And so they would give me like, what were the blast simulators called? Like G simulators or something like that. I can't remember. They simulate like a mortar. I can't remember what they're called. Whatever. It's a blast simulator. And so they give me a couple of those, and I would teach like actions on contact, like how to react when you're getting shot at. And then I would also teach like looking for UXOs, unexplosive or unexploded ordinances or whatever the hell they're called. And what I would do is I would always set up fake IEDs, and I would blow off mortars. And like if they didn't react properly, we'd scream at them and start yelling and shit. And we'd had M16s with blanks. And we'd just start firing randomly just to freak them out. I think we only went a little overboard, to be honest, but it's whatever. We're having a good time. So I did that for like 7 months. And then I went on pre-deployment training. So this was getting ready to be 2009. And I was getting ready to deploy. Now, in the meantime, I had been fighting mixed martial arts. I started training in 2007. Um, and one of the best things I've ever did was start training jujitsu. It was unbelievable what it's done for my life. And 2009, I decided I wanted to be a fighter. And so I did a jiu-jitsu tournament, and I won a Naga tournament out in Charlotte in like February 2009. And then when I was getting ready to go to pre-deployment training, and I had just signed a contract for my very first MMA fight. And it was the Carolina Crown 2 at the RBC Center. I fought a Marine from Camp Lejeune. So everyone's like, oh, you're going to get your ass kicked by a Marine. I'm like, whatever, dude. And so I sold it as like, listen, don't you want your war fighters to be like in the best shape of your life? I was supposed to go do convoys again. I'm like, what if I get kidnapped? Don't you want somebody trained, like not just, to shoot guns, but physically be able to defend themselves? Come on, guys. You guys are teaching combatives and all this stuff. Wouldn't you want your people fighting MMA as well? And my commander bought it, and he's like, hey, let's see what he's got. And I ended up winning the fight. Like a week later, I was deployed. So it was wild. 2009, we went to Balad in northern Iraq. They called it Mortaritaville because we get mortared 2 to 3 times a day. I think we had somebody guy work up in BDOC, or what they call it, the talk. Yeah, I think it was the talk. I don't remember. But he counted. We got mortared 195 times while we were there for 6 months. It was just unbelievable. Some days was like 3 or 4 mortars. We go like a day without anything, and then the next day we get hit like 6 or 7 times during the day, and it was sporadic too. So you just got used to it, man. Like trauma is an interesting thing. Sometimes when you have so much of it, you just become numb to it, especially in deployment mode. When you're deployed, it's just like, the alarm starts going off. The mortar's going to land 20 feet from you or whatever. You're just like, don't hit me. Don't hit me. I remember once I was sitting in a porta-john and, the porta-johns are hot, man. Like it's ridiculous. I used to go with the door open because I was too hot. I didn't care. I was like, somebody's going to see me, whatever. And I remember I was sitting down, I was taking a crap, and the mortar, the siren starts going, the klaxon, the wah, wah. So what that means, for those who don't know, that means it's going to land within 1,000 meters of where you're standing. And so I just sat to like, God, if I die in a shitter, I'm going to be so upset. Like, just give me this one, please. And I'm not shitting you, like 40, 50 feet away, it landed near some of the base housing, and like rocks were falling on the shitter. I'm just like, man, that was so close. I almost died.
Well, I guess that's a good way to get some splashback.
Oh man, it was rough, dude.
As a matter of fact, the siren. Fuck, are you under attack right now? I just heard the siren.
These fire trucks, man, it's constant. But that deployment, I was law enforcement, so I would drive around. Like they asked us to like pull over Marines and shit for going too fast. I'm like, I'm not gonna pull over a Humvee full of Marines for going too fast. I'm gonna get my ass kicked. I'm good. But that was probably the first time I was greatly affected by something that happened to me. I had heard a gunshot on base, and this was January 6, 2010, and I'd heard a gunshot. I was right there, and I got a call on the radio for a possible suicide. So I pulled up to the building, and there was a bunch of people outside crying. I run inside, and a guy had laid down, gotten fully dressed for work. He put his M16 to the bottom of his chin. He shot himself to the top of the head. But he's still alive. And I walk in there, and what do you do? He's not going to make it. So what I ended up doing was just going over to him and put my hand on his chest and telling him, hey, it's going to be okay. Like he was mouthing to try to say something, but he had blown off his tongue, so he couldn't talk. And I'm pretty sure a lot of it was nerves, but he was definitely alive. He had tears coming out of his eyes, and he could barely move. And I didn't really know what to do. And then next thing you know, out of nowhere, he just grabs, like I still feel his hands on my fingers sometimes when I'm having some messed up dreams or whatever. But he just grabbed my fingers, and I just held his hand until he died. Initially I tried to bury it. They're trying to put me through all kinds of like stress. What do they call it? It was like a decompression training or something like that. And I was like, I'm fine. It's all good. I'm good. And I kept pushing it down. I did what most military folks do, and they just bury it, because if you don't bury it, then they're going to know, then you're undeployable, and then you're worthless. And I didn't really have a lot of nightmares about it right away. It was later on. And after that, I kind of just really started to think about like my guy's mental health. So I was a long-term E4 mafia for quite some time. But that's when I really started to think about like, are my guys okay? Even though they weren't my troops, but I was still higher ranking low class, and I made sure to talk to my guys as much as possible. The guys who seemed like they weren't doing okay, I would invite them to go eat with us, or I would just make jokes and just try to make them laugh constantly. And so like my fix to it was just to bury my traumas and just bring out laughter and just laugh about everything, like literally everything, to the point where I got in trouble for some of the jokes I was making. Understandable, but um, I got back from that deployment, and they pretty much told me I'm undeployable because of what I experienced. And I was like, this is stupid. And I was like, I really want to deploy again because I got addicted to deploying. I loved it. I thought it was great. Life is so simple when you're deployed. It's like wake up, eat your food, don't die, go to sleep, do it again. Go to the gym here and there. It's super simple. I was married at the time, and that put a lot of stress on our marriage. We didn't have a good marriage. We didn't really get along very well. Pretty much all we did was go out and drink. We never really had any other hobbies other than drinking with everybody, the typical military lifestyle. So in that time that I was home, she had been pregnant before I left. I got her pregnant like right before I left in that deployment. I got back and she was about 7 months pregnant. So I just put all my focus into the baby. My daughter was born September 2010. It was one of the happiest days of my life. I was really excited to see her. She was a good kid. We just spent every second together. That kid was my mini me. I'd get back from work and it didn't matter who was holding her. I'd go take her. I'm like, that's mine. Thank you. And I'd go sit down on the couch with her, and I just put everything in my daughter, and I just buried everything. The way I saw it is like, I need to just be strong for everybody else. And I never gave myself the time. And, even at that point, I didn't realize how much damage I was doing to myself. And that just seemed like the easy thing to do, just bury everything. Deployed again. It was right when my daughter was turning 1. Yeah, it was right before her first birthday. We deployed to Afghanistan. And I was a 50 cal gunner again on that. I was Delta truck that time, and that was right during the Obama era. And I'm not going to get into politics, but that was the handcuff area where we weren't allowed to do anything. And half the time we just drove around and just hope we didn't get hit because we weren't allowed to do anything really. They had us walking through minefields and all kinds of stupid shit. So I was super combative with a lot of the dumb things they had us doing. Like, why walk through a minefield when it's like 15, 20 feet away from the towers? Like, why wouldn't we just go up in the towers and look? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why are we walking through minefields? This is stupid. This is unnecessary risk. And eventually got to the point where I started to realize that I had PTSD pretty bad. And, I was walking through a minefield. It's pretty understandable that you're going to be a little freaked out, but it was a lot worse than I had thought. And then people started calling me out on some of the things that I was talking about. And they're like, dude, are you scared? I was like, no, I'm not scared. I just don't want to lose you guys. Like, that's all I could think about. There's no reason for us to be walking out here. You guys are at risk of dying. But I never talked about myself. It was never about me. It was about them. I wanted to make sure they were safe. And we did that for 6 months, and it was fairly uneventful. Every other squad got hit except for us. Like, we're the only squad that didn't get hit. We had no firefights. We had no rocket shot at us. There was a road called Gladius that we drive down, and that was the worst road to drive down because it was really close quarters in towers and everything. And so, people don't realize how normal it is to point a pistol at somebody. Like, I spent half my deployment with my pistol pointed at people because, I can't aim my 50 cal 15 feet away from me. It's easier to use a pistol. And there's people standing up above you, and you don't know if they're going to, come at you or they're going to shoot at you. It gets ridiculous. And after that deployment, that's when I found out that Jody had been hanging around the whole time I was in the military. And that was right about the time I was like, I got to get the fuck out. I'm freaking out. I can barely drive anymore. Like, I'm thinking about like death all the time. And it was to the point where I don't think I'm going to be a good father to my daughter if I stay in the military. So it was about the time I decided to get out.
You've been through more trauma than the majority of people will ever see in a lifetime, probably 10 people combined in a lifetime. And, I credit your resiliency. And,
Thanks, man.
a lot of people are going to want to know something here. With everything that you've been through, what has gotten you through these life challenges? Do you have a mentor, or who did you lean on for strength?
To be honest, nobody. I secluded myself completely, and I was so used to being alone and being like independent as a child. I pushed everyone away. I did it to myself, and my big aha moment was 2015. I'd gotten back together with my ex, and life was just going to shit. I was seeing Michael, the guy that killed himself. I was seeing him all the time, and I was an alcoholic. I was going down a bad road, man. I was to the point where I hated my life and I wanted it to end. Now, like I said, I had just gotten back together with my ex, but we were not a good partnership. We were cheating on each other, and it was, I'm not an angel. And eventually got to the point where 2015, I found out my youngest daughter was autistic, which that's hard on anybody. Because you lose your idea of who your kid's going to be. And now she'll never have a boyfriend. She'll never live alone. She'll never drive a car. She'll never do all of those things. Like, she still doesn't talk. She's 9. So that really hurt. And I had quit doing everything. I had in 2014, I had met my jiu-jitsu coach, Mark. Mark was my first person that I saw as like my big mentor. My stepmom was always there for me. I loved her and everything like that, but she's my mom. That's different, and Mark was always trying to teach me how to just calm down. I was so angry all the time, and I didn't realize how bad it was. And then 2015, about mid-year, I found out that my ex was cheating on me again, and I had been drinking so much to the point where I just said, fuck it. And that was kind of when I had my aha moment, and I put a gun to my head and I pulled the trigger, but the gun didn't go off. And that's when I decided, like, maybe I'm just supposed to suffer. Like, that's this what my life is supposed to be. And it's just like seems so consistent. And I was still living that fucking victim train, that victim card, man. And I want to say it was maybe a week after that, I went to my coach and we started talking. I was like, hey, I want to go to Brazil with you, because he was going to Brazil to get his black belt. And we had a lot of really good conversations. And that's when I realized, like, you know what? I don't have to listen to all that shit from the past. Like, that the past isn't going to control who I'm going to be. And I decided right then and there, like, I'm going to become something. And I don't know what it is. I don't know who I'm going to be, but I need to be something bigger than what I am now. And that's when I decided that the person who could have pulled that gun out of my hands didn't exist. So I was going to create that person, and I was going to become that person, and Mark was one of my big mentors that really helped me down that road. He stood in my corner for multiple MMA fights. He stood in my corner for multiple jiu-jitsu tournaments, and eventually got to the point where I started Warriors Next Adventure. Once I finally hit like the max, my peak of self-healing, I decided I need to help other people with this. And 5 years after my suicide attempt, I got a call on the suicide hotline that I run, and the guy just so happened to be 2 blocks down the road. So I drive down to his house. Don't do this. I'm trained. I'm very good at what I do. I'm a crisis intervention specialist. So, like, I don't recommend anybody doing this. But I went to his house and I got inside of his van, and he had a pistol in his hand. I told him, listen, if you're going to do this, you're going to do this with me in the car. And he's like, you're fucking crazy. I was like, yeah, I know, but I was alone when I did it. I was like, you're not going to be alone, but you owe me a conversation. And within about 45 minutes, I got him crying and took the pistol out of his hand. So the culmination of me creating the person who could have stopped myself, I put all of my efforts into helping other people. And it was like, that was kind of like who I realized who I really was, who I needed to be. And I had already started my nonprofit, but that was kind of like this is who you are. So I created the hero that I needed, and I became that person. And anybody can do that, And obviously this shit gets me emotional. I'm an emotional person. I don't give a shit. I'm an MMA fighter, so I could probably kick the shit out of most people. Are going to make fun of me. Um, but you know, I tell people all the time, and I ask the question, and I want to ask the question to your guests and everybody out there. It's, ask yourself, who's your hero? And every time I give a speech, I always ask people, who's your hero? And everyone gives me some bullshit answer. Usually, like it's my dad, it's my mom, which nothing wrong with that. But I want to pose the other question: why isn't it you? Like, what can you do in the future? What manifestation of a person can you create to create yourself into your own hero? I don't consider myself my hero now. Me 5 years from now, that guy, yes, 100%. I cannot wait to be him because that guy's doing amazing things. But you can quite literally create whoever you want to be, and you can go be that person no matter what trauma you've been through. But you have to do the work. You have to accept your past. You have to work through the traumas that you've experienced, and you have to realize that these traumas do not have to have power over me anymore. And you can recreate yourself anytime you want. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what you've experienced. No matter what you've been through, you can recreate who you want to be. You can go become that person. So if you don't have a mentor, become one for yourself.
Absolutely. And I can testify to that. Recreate and reinvent and take those traumas and tell them, you are not going to live rent free in my head any longer. I am going to save myself. I am going to be my own hero. And when you're a selfless servant, you always put others before yourself. That's just how men like us are wired. We will abandon ourselves. We will abandon ourselves to go help others, or something big, even bigger than that, because that's how guys like us work. Again,
most people who join the military are essentially like the 5 love languages. Our language is service, service is self, a service before self. For me, people always tell me like, hey, you're always talking about put yourself first, but you're always doing shit for other people. I was like, do you think I go out and help people like just to help you? No, I'm doing it because I'm selfish, because helping people makes me feel like I deserve to be here. 5 years ago, or was that 7 years ago now? I'm not supposed to be alive. And the fact that I am alive, it's my second chance, and I'm going to do everything possible to change the world. People say I'm crazy, but I don't give a shit. The crazy ones are usually the ones that do change the world. And helping people gives me purpose. Therefore, I help people selfishly because it makes me feel like I deserve to be here. And so helping others helps me.
And when you do have a second lease on life, things change. You see through a different set of lenses that you would have never seen through before. Because gratitude will overcome you, and you will still, start to live that life of, again, gratitude. And unless it's hard to explain that overwhelming sense when it does come over you, and knowing that you have been called to serve and you are doing exactly what you are supposed to be doing. And those signs are everywhere, folks. And like I've always said, everybody's called to serve, but it's up to you to, open your eyes and to see it. And there's signs everywhere. Signs are everywhere. If you open your eyes to it and open your heart to it, you will see them, follow them, and you will soon be on your path to living your life to its fullest potential. And that's what this podcast is all about. Now, Nick, we are limited on 59 minutes here, and I want to get to some other topics here
Sure.
before our time runs out. And your story is incredible. And like I said, I hope that we're doing everything that we can to get your story out in a way that it deserves to be told.
I appreciate that.
You have lived a life of service, and you started Warriors Next Adventure, again, to help the veteran community, to help that population that is vulnerable and at risk, and to use your traumas to help other people go through their traumas. Now, explain what you do at Warriors Next Adventure.
So the main focus is to help veterans overcome PTSD through recreational therapy, because if you don't know what EMDR is, right? So it uses eye movement. God damn it. I need to remember this phrase. I use it so often. I'm not going to remember these things, but it's like a left-right movement. And so it's a bilateral movement, and a therapist or a counselor will use it to help you reprogram. And it essentially helps you relive an experience without having to talk about it, but you focus on, you put it at the top of your head. And what you're doing is you're in a new experience, and that's sitting next to the counselor doing the left right movement with their fingers, right? I had a theory that it doesn't have to be just that. It can be literally any activity that your focus is the activity while you talk about traumas, while you talk about, negative things from your past. And so I started taking veterans hiking, and that's when I started to realize that I have a key here, right? Vulnerability is the key to getting other people to open up, right? And so being vulnerable, telling my story and telling people, hey, listen, these were the mistakes that I've made, and this is how I've overcame that. And a lot of these guys will open up and start talking, but our focus is whatever task is we're doing. What if we're climbing a mountain, or we're working on a race car, we're training jujitsu, we're doing some other task while talking on to that. So what happens is that trauma becomes tied to that new memory, right? And it takes away some of the power that trauma has over you, and that new experience kind of takes over. So while we're climbing a mountain and you're telling me about a trauma you had in the military, that trauma is now tied to the sights, the smells, the sounds of you hiking on top of that mountain. So every single time you have some sort of flashback from that trauma, you will be right back there with us on that mountain, or working on that car, or just in that group of camaraderie, right? Because we focus on oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, and endorphins. Those are the main things that you need to be happy. I call those the happy mixture. And so we take all of these chemicals and we try to activate them. So adrenaline, a lot of our traumas happen during times of adrenaline. So we do things that cause adrenaline, like racing race cars, right? So veterans get to actually race the cars that we work on. Dopamine, you get that when you have accomplishments, right? When you climb that mountain, when you're finally up on top of that mountain, right? And then same with serotonin. Endorphins when you're doing some sort of exercise. And then oxytocin is actually released during like camaraderie. When you're spending time with people that you're really close to, or your loved ones, or sex, or whatever. Like oxytocin is released in multiple different ways. I hope you're not having sex with your buddies. That's a little weird. But anytime we get together with groups of friends, like in a safe area, right, that we can communicate with each other, you're going to open up. So that's the premise of what we're doing. We use the programs just as a way to get people together. So we have the jiu-jitsu program where we get veterans involved in jiu-jitsu. We partner with We Defy Foundation, great organization. We have Operation Wolf Dog. We partner with Minnesota Wolf Dogs, and we utilize their wolf sanctuary where we rescue wolves. We get to play with wolves. Like, you come up to Minnesota, man, I'll put you in a cage with a wolf if you want to. We build dog houses for them. It's a great thing, and it's helping veterans give service to something else, something other than themselves. We have the mountain climbing division, and then we also have the dirt track race cars. So we have we're getting ready to buy another car, so we'll have 2 cars in our possession, and so we'll work on the cars together, and then you actually get to race on the racetrack. There's no practice though; like, you just get in the car and go. Hopefully, you know how to drive a stick. And then we do a bunch of meetups. I teach meditation, and then I'm also a motivational speaker for the Air Force now. So I'm busy.
I tell you what, guys, look, Nick Rahm, he does not sugarcoat anything. He is real, he is raw, and he is unscripted. And he is at warriorsnextadventure.com. If you want to reach out to him and connect with him, warriorsnextadventure.com. Now, before we close out here, now, look, guys, as if he doesn't do enough already, this maniac is going to be rowing. Is it like a canoe or something across the Atlantic Ocean? And I wanted to finish on this because what in the hell inspired you to say, you know what? I want to go row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean in December.
Well, I still don't want to do it, but I'm doing it. It's a 28-foot rowboat called the Whoopie. It's painted battleship gray for the Navy. It's got the A-10 Warthog teeth on the front of it for the Air Force. It's got Marine Corps red, fight or die on the side. And then it's called the Whoopie for the Army. So Fight or Die is an organization that they bought this boat. They rowed across the ocean in 2019, and I had them on my podcast to pretty much tell them the same thing you told me. You're an idiot. You're crazy. Why would you do this? And one of my ambassadors was watching, and my ambassador called me, Chad. He called me multiple times, like, dude, we got to do this. I'm like, go fuck yourself, Chad. I'm not rowing across the ocean. No. And he called me back a couple days later, and my slogan, I have it on my shirt here, it says explore everything. Because my theory is that you can kill yourself after you've explored everything, which is impossible. You cannot explore every single option in life. It is impossible. You will never do it. I don't care who you are. You will never see every single option, right? So that essentially means don't ever stop trying to find your purpose. Don't ever stop trying to find what's going to help you. And he's like, how is your slogan going to be explore everything if you're not going to explore this ocean with me? I was like, you son of a bitch. So I was like, all right, fine, let's do this. This is crazy. And so we called my other ambassador, Tommy. We called my board member, Will. So we're all Warriors Next Adventure guys, but we're rowing for Fight or Die. So Fight or Die is a great organization. It's run by all veterans. They teach a mental health first aid class, which is pretty cool, and it's free. And then on top of that, they do grants for people going to school for mental health for veterans, which is awesome. So the row itself, we're flying out to Spain, and then we're going to La Gomera, which is in the Canary Islands. We leave November 28th, so less than 30 days. Kind of shitting myself here. And what we do is we row this 28-foot rowboat from Spain in the Canary Islands to Antigua in the Caribbean. It's a 3,000-mile row. It's 100% unassisted too.
So you're going to row a boat 3,000 miles with how many other guys?
Yep. So there's 2 row stations. So me and my partner Will, we row for 2 hours, and then Tommy and Chad sleep in the cabins. There's a cabin in the front, cabin in the back. You can fit 2 people in there. It's super uncomfortable. If you really had to, you could fit 3 in there, but it's just super uncomfortable. So one person, it's fine. It's not a problem. It's still not like you can't like stand up in there, and then you can barely sit up. So those 2 hours that you're off, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to poop. We got a poop bucket, which is really nice. Got a nice toilet seat on it. We actually are the only boat in the fleet that has a shower because we're Air Force, and come on, why not have a shower? If we have a pump, we might as well have a shower. So we installed a shower a couple months ago, and yeah, so we'll row for 2 hours, sleep for 2 hours, and the record was actually set in this boat at 50 days and 11 hours. So we're trying to do it in 45 to 49 days.
Incredible. So now, is there a rescue boat, a big rescue boat that will trail you?
Yeah, so there's a rescue yacht. So it's part of a race. If you guys want to look it up, it's called the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. Highly recommend looking at some of those videos. The recap videos are awesome, but they have 2 rescue yachts. One stays in La Gomera, then the other one is going back and forth to the fleet the whole time. All right, but we'll be almost 1,500 miles spread out. So the rescue yacht in La Gomera stays there just in case the boat is in the front of the pack and one of the back boats has an issue. So the boat in La Gomera can just take off and help. We have all freeze pack food. Peak Refuel gave us 50% off, so shout out to Peak Refuel. Not all the food is amazing, but it's better than MREs.
Hey man, man, all the respect to you in the world, brother. Nick's Warrior's next adventure, okay, it just kind of fits his brand really well, is rowing the Atlantic, 3,000 miles on a voyage that will take about 2 months to accomplish. But
so you can actually download an app too called YB Races, and you could follow us across the whole ocean. So check out YB Races, and then you click on Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge 2022.
YB Races, awesome, dude. I'm gonna track you when you're out there, man. I'm gonna see.
All right.
I'm gonna see what you're up to, man. And man, you are full of so much value, and it's unfortunate that we only have an hour on this program. But I mean, everything that you have always talked about. And, I've been on your program before, back when we were doing the tally bill. So, I appreciated the platform you gave me, and I'm returning that favor right now. I believe in you. I believe in Warriors Next Adventure. And again, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of you and everything that you've done in the community. But with that, we sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do for our great nation. And in the military and veteran community, our country can't thank you enough for your honorable service, sacrifice, and dedication to our great nation.
Thanks, brother. Come climb a mountain in Colorado with us next year.
Almost certainly try. Until next time, folks, for Tuesdays with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.